The Monroe Doctrine is 4 paragraphs of a speech given in front of Congress by President Monroe. And that's it. That's the Monroe Doctrine. But anytime it can be used to justify something that we want to do, it gets used. The thing that really drives me nuts about the use of the Monroe Doctrine is that there are parts of it that are ignored. We got hundreds of comments from people over the weekend, and many of them just say, Monroe Doctrine. Okay. Cite that U.S. code. Go cite it. It's not. It's a part of a speech. It's a part of a speech from over 200 years ago. That's all it is. It's got no enforcement mechanism other than the enforcement mechanism that is built into the U.S. Constitution. That is it. If you want to say Monroe Doctrine, so we're going to do a thing, then what you would do is you would say Monroe Doctrine, and you would sign your name, and then you give to Congress, and then Congress would vote whether or not we're going to Monroe Doctrine those people down there in South America. That's when you could use it. In the wars of the European powers and matters relating to themselves, we have never taken any part, nor does it comport with our policy to do so. It is only when our rights are invaded or seriously menaced that we resent injuries or make preparation for our defense. Part of the Monroe Doctrine, which is mentioned several times, is that we do not get involved in the affairs of the European nations. We don't get involved in their wars. We're not going to tell them about their policies. We're going to sit here and we're going to mind our own business. Now, he does end up saying some of our own business is what takes place in our hemisphere, but we're going to leave you guys alone. Would you guys say that we are adhering to the Monroe Doctrine? Have we been adhering to the Monroe Doctrine? I don't see anyone on the right or the left anytime when they're like, oh yeah, NATO, UN, or any of our other foreign policy adventures that we have, being like, you guys, have you considered the fact that this does not fit within the well-framed bounds of the Monroe Doctrine? No, it's only ever used when we want to go do a thing. That's when it gets used. We owe it, therefore, to candor and to the amicable relations existing between the United States and those powers to declare that we should consider any attempt on their part to extend their system to any portion of this hemisphere as dangerous to our peace and safety. With the existing colonies or dependencies of any European power, we have not interfered and shall not interfere. First off, it's important to say, like, some of these colonies are declaring independence, they're winning independence, and some of them are still colonized by the Europeans. And he's saying those, we're not gonna mess with those. But these people who have declared independence like we did, and they won their independence like we did, you guys are not going to come back in. We're going to make sure. Well, doesn't actually even say that we're going to make sure. It just says that we'll take it as a threat. But with the governments who have declared their independence and maintain it, and whose independence we have on great consideration and on just principles acknowledged, we could not view any interposition for the purpose of oppressing them or controlling in any other manner their destiny by any European power in any other light than as the manifestation of an unfriendly disposition toward the United States. Our policy in regard to Europe, which was adopted at an early stage of the wars which have so long agitated that quarter of the globe, nevertheless remains the same, which is not to interfere in the internal concerns of any of its powers, to consider the government de facto as the legitimate government for us, to cultivate friendly relations with it, and to preserve those relations by frank, firm, and manly policy. Once again saying, we're going to stay out of your business. We consider this part over here to be part of our business. That's what we got, okay? Yes, unless they have oil. That part's coming up. It is impossible that the Allied powers should extend their political system to any portion of either continent without endangering our peace and happiness, nor can anyone believe that our southern brethren, if left to themselves, would adopt it of their own accord. Now, I found that line to be important. We do not believe that our southern brethren, if left to themselves, would adopt it on their own accord. Now, specifically, they're talking about the European nations coming back and colonizing these countries. I'm not going to be super specific and say, oh, well, this is China is not a European nation or something like that. Let's assume that they would mean that about many other nations as well, and not just Europe. That's just not just that specific group of nations. So let's say that, okay? But it says, if left to themselves, that they would not, if left to themselves, adopt it on their own accord. I read in that sentence, what if they do choose to do it on their own accord? Because they're specifically talking about the European nations coming back and colonizing the countries in our hemisphere. What I don't see here is what would be our position if they did do it on their own accord? Meaning, what if Venezuela decided, hey, wouldn't it be great if we were friends with China and Russia? Not that like China was coming and exerting power over them or anything. I just wonder. And there is a difference whether or not a nation is coming there and taking them over, or whether or not this nation decides that that is a good ally for them to have and they ally with them. Is there not a difference there? And regardless, as Michael Scarn had asked earlier on X, and I pointed out, I don't see any of this as justification for anything that we've done. First off, we've already violated the Monroe Doctrine by all the stuff that we do in Europe to begin with, and in all the other nations around the world. Like the Monroe Doctrine says, we're going to stay out of your business and you're going to stay out of ours. We ignored the whole we're going to stay out of your business part, but we're also going to make sure that they stay out of our business too. Okay, well, let's follow the whole Monroe Doctrine, the whole thing. Regardless, even if you found the justification in here, what you did not find is that this is a law, that this is a binding treaty, that this is part of the U.S. Constitution. Even if you found it and you said, yep, see, that's where it says that we are going to keep these countries from having a foothold in Venezuela or Cuba or any of these other places. Even if you found that, do you know what you would then have to go and do? You would have to go to Congress and ask for an authorization to use of military force or a declaration of war. There's nothing in here that says, and therefore, if you violate the Monroe Doctrine, or if the Monroe Doctrine is in effect, then we don't have to go to Congress to ask for a declaration of war, or at least an authorization of use of military force. None of that says. It's just like a policy belief from I don't remember the specific year, 1801. I don't know the specific year on that, a long time ago. And it's important to know the principles. Like, this is a principle of the early founding of America, just like many of the other things that we talk about. But it doesn't say in here, and if one of these countries starts to move in, I'm immediately going to go in there and drop some bombs. I bet you if Mr. President Monroe thought that people in 2026 were going to be this eager for war, he would have said, and that's why I would go to Congress and I would get specific authorization from them to do something if they want to do that. So Monroe Doctrine, sure.